Week 6 preview on the FTN Fantasy Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast. I'm Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy, and special guest today, Bryan Knowles, who you know from his weekly columns on FTN Fantasy, and he is sitting in for Mike Tanier, who is unavailable this afternoon to preview Week 6 in the NFL. It's October 10th, 2024. Don't forget our sponsor is Underdog Fantasy. The NFL season is off and running, and there's no better way to enjoy it than Underdog Fantasy. It's the easiest place to play fantasy sports and the fastest growing app in the industry. Underdog now offering a new customer FTN special with up to $1,000 on your first time deposit. The Underdog app is easy to use, and all of their weekly contests are back, so head over to Underdog for a deposit match up to $1,000 when you sign up with code FTN. That's up to $1,000 extra. Code is FTN. NFL season is here, and who better to celebrate with than Underdog Fantasy? All right, we're going to preview Week 6. If you're with us live, we'll take your questions and comments on this week's games. We're going to talk about a few, and we're going to start with tonight and the really good Thursday night game between the somewhat scuttling 49ers at 2-3 and the on top of the division Seattle Seahawks at 3-2. But both teams are in the top 10 in DVOA so far. And I'm curious to get your take on the 49ers as you are a 49ers fan. So what is your general take on what's been going on with the team this year?
I think the take from 20,000 feet is that the Niners have played like a good team when they've been expected to play like a great team. So a lot of fans think they are a bad team. The expectations were high enough that the fact that they have scuffled a little bit in some situational football has created more fear and more panic than actually has been deserved. Because this is a Super Bowl or bust season. This was bring everyone back together. You were winning in overtime in the Super Bowl. Nothing short of that matters. And now you're 2-3. And if you lose tonight, you're looking at 2-4 with the Chiefs coming to town, and then the season spirals off the rails. There needs to be a little bit more calm at the moment among the general 49er fan base because they've lost 3 one-score games. It's not like they have yet to get blown out or embarrassed or anything like that. They've been competitive week in, week out. They have, we're talking about some situational problems that they have and need to get cleaned up. But the panic is there's too much panic at the moment. People need to calm down just a little bit.
Yeah, I think that the problem here definitely is if they lose close tonight and then they lose to Kansas City and they're looking at 2-5, I think there's that mental thing where they have to psych themselves up to, yes, we can come back from this.
Right.
Like we can go 8-1 the rest of the way. Or 8-9-1 the rest of the way, and we can make the playoffs at 11-6, and we can make the playoff. Like they really need tonight. They really do. They really need this game.
They are digging themselves a hole that it's hard to get out of. That's the problem. They are certainly talented enough to do it. You'd like their chances of coming back from 2-4 than the Giants or something like that. But at some point, losses do matter, even if they happen in September and October. Yeah. I don't think the Niners are. I would still take the Niners to make the playoffs, even if they lose tonight. I think they are still good enough, and the schedule works out in their favor. But you're removing all your margin for error this early.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about the Niners so far has been they're much, much better passing than running. They're second passing in DVOA. They're 20th running. And Mason has a number of explosive runs. So if you take out the explosive runs, the running game is even worse this year. Do you think that that's a McCaffrey not being there, or do you think that there's a function of the offensive line having problems?
I think losing McCaffrey hurts. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I think a lot of that's what's happening is Mason has struggled in the red zone. He's struggled in short situations like that. And I think that is on Mason as opposed to the offensive line. The Niners are second in offensive DVOA, the fifth in offensive DVOA outside of the red zone at 19.6%, and they are 22nd in DVOA inside the red zone. And I think a lot of that is McCaffrey's absence affecting the short running game and the short passing game. So defenses are able to keep more on. If they can't pass short, we'll just clog the lanes. We'll stop Mason, and that has kept the Niners out of the end zone.
Yeah. The Seahawks are also are the opposite. They're a strong running team. And the 49ers have had problems with run defense this year.
They have all three losses they've had. I believe they've had 9+ missed tackles. So, do you think they have basically the old working story is that they have not scored when they've gotten down the red zone, which keeps games close late, which means teams can keep running on them late, which means they're missing tackles and are allowing teams to come back on
them. There's a lot of injuries. The 49ers are dealing with some injuries, but it looks like Kittle's going to play. Yeah, and the Seahawks are missing 3 of their starting defensive linemen, so that's a problem. That might get the 49ers run game going a little bit. The Seahawks are also very poor in the ESPN blocking metrics this year, and the 49ers are 6th in pass rush win rate. So that would seem to suggest a problem for Geno Smith, that he's going to face a lot of pressure.
I saw people suggesting that Geno Smith's a great play because the Niners allow so many passing yards. Well, the Niners allowed a lot of passing yards because they were up big against New England and the Jets. But Seattle needs to be able to stick with the running game to win this one because the Niners pass rush and the Niners pass coverage has actually been very good outside of a few big plays allowed. So the Seahawks need to run and run early, keep that pressure on that interior of the Niners defense, which is missing players at all 3 levels, and just kind of keep this game close and just dare the Niners to make a tackle. Because when they've lost, they haven't been able to do that.
One of the interesting debates on the FTN Discord on the DVOA channel was, who is Seattle's second wide receiver? Because San Francisco's been very vulnerable to number 2 wide receivers so far this year. But who is that? I think it's Jackson Smith-Njigba at this point. I think Lockett at this point is number 3.
I think you're right.
But Seattle and San Francisco have both been vulnerable to deep passes, and both Smith-Njigba and Lockett run the same amount of deep passes. So I don't know which one of them is the play. Right? If you want to do an over-under or something, I don't know which one of them is the play for this week.
I think I would take JSN, both because I think he is the second receiver, and also Lockett's a tendency to fall down when contact, and if the Niners going to missing tackles, you want to fall down. You want to keep going because you just dare the Niners to whiff.
The line is 49ers -3.5. The system is picking the Seahawks +3.5 barely. Subjectively, I feel more like the Niners. I feel like they need this game really badly. And that they were my Super Bowl pick. Like, despite the injuries, I feel like they are better than this. Like, they need to go in and show that they are better than this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that their record is a combination of the injuries and some I don't want to say minor things. I don't want to overstress the Niners' losses, but like their kicker got hurt last week. They had a 97-yard pass completion against them against the Vikings. It's been a lot of. If one thing had been different, the Niners would have won these sorts of games. And Seattle too, yet to win a game in conference. Also got surprisingly beaten by a massive underdog last week. It's not like Seattle's in such a in a more confident position than the 49ers are at this moment. In some ways, this is big for Seattle because they brought Mike McDonald in because they had to play, Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay 4 times a year. So this is kind of proof that you can actually stop these guys. I don't like I like the Niners by 3, so I suppose I would take the Seahawks -3.5, but I do think the Niners are going to come out on top tonight.
All right, let's go to Sunday. There's a couple of interesting Sunday games with rookies starting, right? Spencer Rattler's first start and Drake May's first start. But the big 1:00 game is actually another rookie, and that's Jaden Daniels in the Commanders, 4-1 at the Ravens, 3-2. It's an interesting one. This is kind of a DVOA prove-it game.
Absolutely.
Right? Because in DVOA has the Commanders much lower than EPA does. And preseason projections certainly had the Ravens much higher than the Commanders. And in-season DVOA likes the Ravens much more than the Commanders. And not all advanced stats feel the same way. So this is kind of the DVOA prove-it game here.
Yeah. It feels it does feel like this is the week the other shoe drops for Washington. Like, they have been good to this point against a number of teams, but the Ravens are not a number of other teams. The Ravens are like creme de la creme of the contenders in my book. And so it feels like this is one where Washington's going to go and kind of show that, oh, we are still building up to good things as opposed to being a contending team right now.
I mean, their offense is great and their defense is lousy, and their defense has had one good game, and it was against Cleveland.
Yes.
So I would think that Lamar Jackson is going in there, and when he's not running all over them, he's passing all over them, or maybe vice versa. They're the worst defense in the league against short passes. They're terrible against number one wide receivers. They're terrible against tight ends. They're like just a bad defense in pretty much every way.
And I think Washington's offense has to come back to earth eventually. They are scoring on 63% of their drives. The only team that's done more than that are the 2000 Rams. And I don't think this is the greatest show on turf Rams we have going on in Washington.
And they're doing it despite not being good in the red zone so far.
Yeah, they're just skipping the red zone. They're just, let's go 40-yard touchdowns. Fine.
Yeah, which is interesting. The Ravens defense is also not. So there's sort of a likely regression towards the mean coming for both the both the Washington offense to be better in the red zone and the Ravens defense to be better in the red zone also.
Yeah.
Mindwater believes that the Commanders are going to get stomped. I don't think the Redskins are going to get stomped because they don't exist anymore, but the Commanders are going to get stomped.
It feels like the stopping is going to be done by Derrick Henry. What he's being able, I thought that Henry was not washed up. I think that would be too strong, but I did not expect him to be performing like this.
I think there was a feeling amongst a lot of us that he had just become just another running back, right? Like that guy who was super special 3 years ago was gone, and it looks like he's not gone.
The last 30-year-old or older running back to lead the league in rushing DYIR was Curtis Martin in 2004. And Derrick Henry, I think Henry's got a few shot at it as long as he can stay healthy.
The one thing I will note about the Ravens defense is it's weak against deep passes. In fact, in general, they are much better in pass defense if we include sacks and throwaways. Their pass rush is stronger than their coverage this year. And they've got some injuries. Humphrey's been injured a little bit. I think everybody's playing, but they've had some injuries.
Right. I think everyone was practicing last time I checked. And of course,
even if they're not practicing, I think they're playing.
Certainly.
The line is Ravens -6.5.
I like Baltimore -6.
Our system is really strong on both the Ravens and under 52.5.
Okay.
With the idea that the Ravens defense is better and the Commanders offense is not quite as good as what we've seen so far this year.
I think I'd agree there. Just small sample size and stuff like that. If Washington's offense is this good, they're going to win the Super Bowl, and I think they'll come back to. They'll come back.
Well, no, because if Washington's offense is this good, they're going to lose in the playoffs 45-42.
Fair enough.
All right, let's move to 4 p.m. We'll start with the West Coast team, which is the Chargers, a 2-2 at the Broncos. I can't believe I'm saying this, 3-2. Because their defenses, both of these teams have been driven by defense, which is a surprise in one case.
Yes.
I think if you had said, like, despite how bad the Denver defense was for a while last year, if you had said Denver is going to be driven by defense this year with Bo Nix struggling, I would have been like, all right. If you had told me the Chargers would be driven by defense with Justin Herbert struggling, I'd be like, really? But yeah, Justin Herbert is struggling. And the defense is second over 4 games in DVOA. Denver is 4th. The difference between these teams is special teams, which is not really sustainable that much. So whatever, these teams are very alike so far. But if you think of what we knew going into the season, I mean, you would take Herbert over Nix, right? Like Nix has been bad. Nix passes short all the time, and yet Nix is the second worst quarterback in short passing. Only Deshaun Watson has been worse.
It's amazing because Nix is actually like about league average in actual and in yards per in air yards per attempt in ADOT, but he's 3rd in prayer yards, which is FTN's way of counting uncatchable air yards. He has 745 air yards, uncatchable air yards. Only Caleb Williams and Deshaun Watson have been worse. So he's averaging less than 3 catchable air yards per attempt. This is the dinkiest and dunkiest offense we've seen in a long time.
How many stats are there in the NFL right now where you have to add the phrase "only Deshaun Watson has been worse"?
We'll be looking at that in my article this week for FTN. Good Lord.
The Chargers' pass defense is second in the league against short passes this year and 30th against deep passes. So have fun, Bo Nix.
Yeah. No, this is not.
On the other hand, the Broncos, this kind of surprised me, number 1 in pass rush win rate on ESPN.
Really?
And the Chargers' offensive line is 31st in pass block win rate.
That last bit doesn't surprise me nearly as much. The Chargers' offense has been taped together with with hope and dreams and with the remnants of Justin Herbert's ligaments. It hasn't been a fun game it hasn't been a fun season to watch either of these offenses.
Hitchhiker's Pie says more teams will just jam the line of scrimmage against Knicks like teams did against 2015 Peyton and the late era Drew Brees. Yeah, and Drew Brees could overcome that, and Bo Nix can't.
Not yet.
Here's one other really interesting stat about the Broncos defense. They are 3rd in the red zone. And to show you how unsustainable that is, in the front zone, which is between the 40 and the 20, they are last. So they let you move the ball into the red zone and then they stop you. It is very likely that their defense will get better in the front and worse in the red.
Small stamp size over 5 weeks.
The line is Chargers, is a Broncos -3 at home. I like the Chargers.
Yeah, but I really like the under. There's not going to be any scoring in this game. I
It's like 35.5, though. That is a really low number.
I still like the under. This game screams it's going to be like 10-9. I don't think either offense is going to be able to do much of anything.
This might be an interesting game to do a teaser. Under 41.5 and Chargers +9.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That there it is. That sounds good.
Like that is feels very likely. The other big 4:00 game, this is the one that I think is more national broadcast, is the 3-1 Detroit Lions at the 3-2 Dallas Cowboys. With the Cowboys, what's interesting, part of it is the Cowboys are below average in both offense and defense so far. They are being lifted by the number 1 special teams, which is not just field goals. Obviously, it's field goals. They're number 1 on kickoffs. And they're strong on both kick returns and punt returns, which makes sense. Yeah. With what's his name from the USFL, who I'm totally forgetting his name now.
The kicker, Aubrey
Tipton. Why am I forgetting his name?
Brandon Knowles. Or do you mean Turpin, the returner?
Turpin, yes, number 9. Yeah. So it makes sense that they're really strong on special teams. The Lions, surprisingly, are only 18th passing so far.
Yeah.
But they are number 2 running. And here comes the Dallas defense, which what will surprise you is they are surprisingly high in run defense in that they are not last. They are 31st, which if you've watched the Cowboys is surprisingly 1 spot higher than you would expect.
Raise the banner.
Miami is dead last.
That doesn't surprise me either. But yes, and they're still going to be without Parsons, I believe. They're still going to be without Kendricks. They're still going to be without.
Right. So the pass rush is going to have a problem against the strong offensive line that should have Ragnow back at center.
Yeah. Yeah. Cowboys are banged up. The Cowboys feel like they should be better than they are, but then the Cowboys usually feel like they should be better than they are. That seems to be the historic place for the Cowboys.
Yeah, well, usually they are, right? They're better in the regular season. And I mean, they lose this game, they start 3-3. It doesn't look like we're on track for another 12-5 season. So here's another, they're going to have Deron Bland back. That's good. Yeah. They're dead last currently covering running backs as receivers.
Ooh, that's not good against Detroit.
That's bad. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs hasn't gotten as many passes this year as he did last year, but I think in this game he will.
Yeah. I will say one thing: the Lions, for the Cowboys offense, the Cowboys have been really good against base defense packages. Prescott is something like hasn't been sacked yet. It's 13 for 19 for 163 yards, and no one uses base defense more this season than Detroit has. So there's a chance that if they can play right, if Detroit plays to their usual strategy, and Dallas might be able to take advantage of that. But
that second rushing versus 31 run defense really stands out. Like, really I feel very Lionsy on this. The line is Lions -3, and the system says no pick, but I feel very Lionsy with the -3. And I feel under on the 52.5 total.
I'll get the under. I could see a world in which this is the week where Dallas's passing attack really, really fires off. Because Prescott, I still think Prescott's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I like. He had some really great plays against Pittsburgh last night. If anyone, Pittsburgh on Sunday. If anyone saw that at the end of the 16-hour marathon day that was Sunday football, I could see a game where Dallas gets to a big lead early, Detroit gets away from the run, and Dallas ends up kind of running away with things. But as long as it stays close, I can't imagine Dallas stopping their running game for very long.
Yeah. And I think with the more running goes the idea of under.
Yeah.
Finally, Sunday night's game is not the best game of the day, but it's interesting because it's the underperforming 1-4 Bengals at the overperforming, even though they have a losing record, 2-3 New York Giants. Just a colossal difference DVOA wise. The Bengals are 12th. The Giants are surprisingly 23rd. But especially on offense, where the Bengals are second in the league, slightly ahead of Washington. Like, despite the fact that they're 1-4, their offense has been really good.
The Bengals are the fourth best 1-4 team of all time in DVOA. So, woo. None of the teams ahead of them recovered to make the playoffs. So this
right. That's the problem. I wrote about it for ESPN that I think is going to go tomorrow. But if you look at the best 3-2 and 2-3 teams, they generally made the playoffs. The best 1-4 teams did not.
Yeah. You're looking at the Bengals having to go 8-4 or something from here on out to recover. And I still think they're good enough to do that, but the defense has to just stop somebody at some point. They didn't force one Ravens punt in the second half. They only forced one punt. They only had one stop against Washington. They only had two stops against Carolina and Andy Dalton. They have to get off the field at some point. They have a 19.
Now, what helps them do that is that Malik Neighbors may still be in concussion protocol.
Yes. Well, then they'll just throw 500 passes to Wan'Dale Robinson for 4 yards each.
Darius Slayton, I would think. These teams the Bengals are 30th against number one wide receivers, and the Giants are 28th. So I do like, I couldn't find a Neighbors prop, but I did find Jamar Chase over 72.5 yards.
Yeah. I like it. The Bengals offense is not the problem. And the Giants.
What the Giants have going for them is the pass rush.
Yep.
Brian Burns is 5th in pass rush win rate on ESPN. The Giants as a team are 4th, but Thibodeau is week to week. So I don't know whether Kayvon Thibodeau is playing in this game.
I think last time I checked, he is out. Yeah, he has not practiced yet. John Runyon.
They'll try to have him go, but it looks more likely that he's not going.
Yeah. And Thibodeau out. And obviously, you never know if Neighbors. The extra day should help with concussion protocol some, but that's up in the air.
Yeah.
I think the Giants are going to be undermanned and underpowered. And the Bengals offense can't be this good and be 1-4. This has to turn around at some point.
Yeah, I do like the Bengals -3.5. I think I saw somewhere that's like the most popular bet in Vegas, and I'm always a little hesitant to be making the most popular bet because the books know more than we think than we do. But I do feel Bengals -3.5 here is the right bet to make if you want to bet on this game.
Yeah. I mean, I would take the over. I think the over was 50 something.
48.5.
Yeah, I would take the over because Daniel Jones has not looked good, but he's looked productive. I think is the way I would phrase that. He has been racking up a lot of yards, and of course Joe Burrow, I think threw for 500 something last week. I would certainly take the over on this game. But yeah, I think the Giants should not be able to match up with the Bengals. The fact that they have so far is concerning for Cincinnati significantly.
Yeah. Just to answer a question from Hitchhiker's Pie about whether base still means 4-3 or 3-4, or will base eventually be nickel, I think that the terminology of football will continue to refer to 4 defensive backs as base because it has for years and years and years, and because there's not another good name to call 4 defensive backs. Like if you start calling nickel base, what do you start calling 4 defensive backs? Like
You can't call it
penny?
heavy.
Well, penny is already like has to do with how many safeties you have, right? Like I think it's going, even though that's not really base defense, we're still going to call that base defense from now on, even though nickel is actually the most common defense.
Yeah, we still call them quarterbacks and tight ends, despite the fact that tight ends
right.
split. And yeah, like
we still call him a quarterback, even though he's not the player who's one quarterback from the fullback lines up in front of the halfback now. But we still call him the fullback, and we call the other guy the halfback. Yeah. So yes,
yeah, weird terminology sticks around, as I'm sure Hitchhiker's Pie from the UK will know from all his cricket terminology and whatnot. Weird things stick around.
Right. I mean, think about the fact that nickel is 5 defensive backs because it's 5. Yet 6 defensive backs is dime, even though that would really be 10 defensive.
Yeah. No, maybe the NFL will lean there eventually.
We'll eventually get to you'll just have Dexter Lawrence and 10 defensive backs.
That might be a good way to try to stop the Cincinnati passing attack.
All right, that does it for our October 10th show, previewing Week 6 in the NFL. Thank you to Underdog Fantasy, our sponsor. Please make sure you're reading FTN Fantasy and subscribing. Like and subscribe to the show. Hey, Bryan, tell folks where to find you besides the FTN Fantasy DVOA page.
At the moment, that's the only place to find me. Is on the FTN.
Well, Twitter. Make sure you're following him on Twitter.
I am occasionally on Twitter at Bryno, and I am occasionally on Threads at Bryno_.
Someone else got Bryno before you. Screw that guy.
Yeah.
All right. And you find me, of course, on Twitter at @SchatzNFL. Normally it's below my thingy, but we didn't want the thing on the other side to say Mike Tanier when it's not Mike Tanier. All right. That does it for today's show. Everybody enjoy Week 6. Bryan, thank you so much for sitting in.
Of course.
We'll be back Monday at 11 a.m. back with Mike to review Week 6 and preview Monday Night Football. See you guys then.